Hey everyone, Counselor Tone here. Unfortunately, we had a slight technical issue with the Friday the 13th episode, and we're still working on sorting that out. So expect that in the next coming weeks. In the meantime, we didn't want to leave you guys with nothing, so here is our Are You Afraid of the Dark Roulette episode. Hope you enjoy it and have a great summer at Camp Porcelain Peak.
Where are we headed?
We're going to Camp Porcelain Peak.
Oh, yeah? Planning on smoking a little dope, having a little premarital sex, and getting slaughtered?
Here are your totally rad camp counselors, Tone, John, and Anthony. Woo!
All right, thank you for that intro, Camp Version of Constance. Welcome to Camp Peak, Season 2, Episode 32.
Ooh.
I am going to be your host today, Camp Counselor Tone, and I'm doing pretty good, and I'm joined by John. How you doing, man?
I am here. I'm here and ready to party.
Yeah, all right, fair enough. What about you, Anthony? How's it going?
I am doing pretty well.
Counselor Anthony, I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, around the camp, it's Camp Stud Anthony. Yeah.
Oh my God.
That's just what some of the campers say. You know, I don't really give into any of that kind of stuff or
because there's no
let it go to my
internet.
head or anything. Yeah.
No internet out in the wilderness.
Yeah, we're completely analog out here, guys, and we're shipping these episodes to you. No, I'm doing well. Just trying to stay busy with the podcast stuff. It's been very strange because it's like we live in the future. We've been so good about like keeping ahead of what we're talking about.
Right.
That right now, while I'm talking about what we're going to be talking about today, I'm having to think about whatever the hell we talked about 2 weeks ago and get everybody to listen to that. So hopefully by this point, I have convinced you to listen to our Sci-Fi Redemptions 4 and our Friday the 13th episodes. So I hope you enjoyed those.
Yeah, in addition to that, if you guys haven't checked it out, if you're listening to this, there are also video versions of our trivia segment. We are thinking about making the transition over to video as well as audio, so we wanted to dip our toes. So if you're interested in watching us fumble through these questions, then you can check that out. Other than that, this week we are going to be doing one of our roulette episodes, similar to Twilight Zone and Tales from the Crypt, but in our camp theme, we are going to be hitting you with Are You Afraid of the Dark Roulette? Yes, so this episode will be submitted for the approval by the Midnight Society.
I almost thought about bringing like a
Bag.
rain stick or something. Like
Or
so I could do that.
A bag full of some random powdery
Well,
material.
my first thought was just to like get some sand and just dump it on the floor in here, but I felt like that wouldn't sit well with my
It was actually
co-hosts.
it was like powdered milk.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's what they used. Anyway, before we get started with our main discussion and diving into those 3 episodes, we are going to hit you guys with a bit of news.
You see, Jason was my son, and today is his birthday.
All right, so I'll get us started with news. My bit of news is that Shudder has released Season 2 of Joe Bob Briggs, which I thought was pretty cool. I mean, I know that you specifically, Anthony, like those commentary tracks, and I think we all are a fan of Joe Bob and just getting that additional information as horror fans. So some of the movies that he's going to be watching is Chopping Mall, which I'm very interested in seeing. One that really caught my attention and I thought was a bit surprising was that he is doing Heathers.
Heathers, yeah.
Which
Yeah.
is really cool. And then the One Cut of the Dead, that movie that you already liked.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like you would probably enjoy that as well. There's quite a few other episodes on there. I won't give them all away, but I thought that was cool and interesting stuff to go ahead and throw at you guys.
Yeah, I haven't checked this out yet, but I was excited to see Chopping Mall because it shows up on a lot of lists of like must-see horror movies, like cult classics, and I haven't personally checked it out. That always gives me incentive to check something off my list as if Joe Bob has an episode on it.
Right.
And Heathers I've seen, and I like the idea of him doing like other cult classics that aren't particularly horror. But I mean, if you're a fan of horror, you are probably a fan of Winona Ryder.
Yeah.
And I'm a big Christian Slater person, so because like Mr. Robot. So
Right.
yeah, I definitely want to go back and rewatch Heathers. I know it's a lot of people's like favorite movie.
Yeah, you get to watch a movie and get IMDb trivia without having to go on to IMDb trivia.
Yeah.
All right, what about you, John? What news did you have for this week?
So they are slowly but surely inching their way towards pre-production of a Wolfman project starring Ryan Gosling.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a big Goss fan, and I know that he has dabbled in at least horror music,
Oh, I'd let him dabble.
but I don't see him as a villain-type character, so I would be interested to see what he does for the more malicious aspects of that role.
Yeah, it'll be tough for people to separate him from a lot of his other characters, but I mean, I feel like it's not that much of a stone's throw away from someone who's cold and calculated like he is in Drive. I think that type of a character would maybe be able to transition that direction. It's tough to say. I mean, he's also pretty ruthless in Blade Runner, so I mean, it would be interesting to see how he would pull that off, because I mean, I know he's got a lot of range, he's able to do a lot of things,
Right.
and he's not bad to look at.
Gosling's kind of like a darling in the indie scene, it seems like. So that could be an indication that this Wolfman might be going in a similar direction to the Invisible Man, doing something smaller. And I could see them doing like because the Wolfman is more of a sympathetic character. He's a guy who doesn't want to be the Wolfman. So I could see them going in that route. I am excited for this because werewolves have always been my favorite of the top tier monsters. I've always thought werewolves were if I had the choice, I'd do it in a heartbeat. I would become a werewolf. Like if somebody out there knows some connections or something, I'd do it. I think it'd be dope because you only have to deal with it once a month, like for a couple days. It's not a big deal,
Okay.
I feel like women deal with worse on a monthly basis, so I can handle being a werewolf. So
Offending all the werewolves out there.
Yeah, so I'm excited about it. That speaking of Invisible Man, that kind of segues nicely into my news, which is I had mentioned in an earlier episode that after the success of Invisible Man with Blumhouse, there had been some rumblings that Leigh Whannell was signing some sort of television type deal or extended project deal with Blumhouse. That has been officially confirmed. We are getting an Upgrade sequel television series, which, I mean, we've talked about Upgrade plenty of times on this show. Yeah. So anybody who doesn't know that we're big fans of that movie obviously hasn't listened and needs to remedy that. But I'm stoked for this. I think that it's a really cool move for Lee. He's apparently supposed to be directing the series. And the little information we have so far is that it's going to be set about 5 years in the future past the movie and have a different protagonist. And the STEM system is going to be more of like a government-controlled way to Minority Report style, like help with preventing crime. So it sounds like we're getting the expansion to that universe that I wanted to see when I saw Upgrade.
That's cool. I am hesitant because Upgrade was great as it is.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't need to be any more. Doesn't need to be any less. Just like it was with A Quiet Place, which I guess we'll see how that ends up panning out. So I hope that since it is in the hands of Blumhouse and Whannell, that they're going to take their time and give us something worth making instead of something like 3 from Hell, where we didn't need. You know what I mean?
I don't see Lee being that kind of director either way. I think he's not quite Garland, where he's like, oh, I did my one thing, now fuck you. But I think that outside of that character, there are so many things in that universe that could definitely be explored and still have interesting repercussions to the rest of the world. I think that would be super cool. And if he uses the same team that he's been using with all of his movies recently, as far as like the cinematography and the music, it could be a similar situation to with Devs, where we got a really beautiful looking series that looked like it didn't belong on television. Right. And if I could get more of that, fucking sign me up.
Any news on what network or whatever that's going to be on? Or
I looked, and it doesn't look like that's been confirmed yet. It could go. There are some people involved that are also involved in FX projects, so it could be something that goes to FX, which would be, I think, a good choice. I think FX has a really good track record with picking really quality stuff, and I think with Lee, I obviously don't know him personally, but from what I've heard in his commentaries and everything, he went through the ringer in terms of dealing with studios completely changing and messing with your project. I mean, look at Saw. And there are other examples. He doesn't have a perfect track record, but I feel like at this point he has the clout from Invisible Man and he has the backing of Blumhouse 100%, it sounds like. So I think that the project is not going to come out unless it's something that he's happy with. And if he's happy with it, I'm sure I'm going to be happy with it.
Yeah, that's a good point. So
Yeah.
we'll keep you updated as that news develops. So that's going to end our news segment. If you want more news, then go ahead and shoot over to our Facebook, where we'll be adding more segments as they develop. In the meantime, we're going to go ahead and get started with that trivia.
Trivia. There, we're done.
John, go ahead.
We're never done. Trivia!
We can't stop now.
God, leave us alone.
Then answer the question. Same category.
Oh, please stop.
Name the killer in Friday the 13th.
Jason! Jason! Jason!
I'm sorry. That's the wrong answer.
No, it's not. No, it's not. It was Jason.
Afraid not? No way.
All right, so let's go ahead and get started in typical fashion. Me, Tone's going to read to John. John's going to read to Anthony. And Anthony is going to read back to me. Last week, Anthony won, so let's see if you can keep your crown and get yourself another peak streak.
Streak peek.
I'm thinking about getting us one of those little crowns, you know, like a
Little
little
Burger King
yeah.
ones. All right, so as we've been doing for the last few months, we are going to be working on that Trivial Pursuit Horror Movie Edition, and our first category is Monster. John, the characters in The Mist from 2007 hole up in which of the following? Home, grocery store, office building, or mall?
I thought they were going to try to get specific to store. It is a grocery store.
That is correct. I guess I should look to double check, but yes, that is correct.
So, Mr. Silva, what actor portrayed the vicious vampire Severin in Near Dark from 1987?
Oh my gosh.
Well, that's one we got to add to the list.
This is ridiculous. I just looked this movie up too to try to figure stuff out for the other trivia. Didn't look at the cast list though. I have no idea. We agreed that Tilda Swinton was permanent in one of our previous episodes. So Tilda Swinton.
It is Bill Paxton.
Damn. R.I.P.
Opposite,
Yeah.
Yeah, I was about to say, I don't know how much further you could get.
Wow.
I wouldn't have guessed Bill Paxton in a million years.
He
True
doesn't.
story.
He doesn't really have that vampire.
I mean, I don't know what kind of movie this is. So.
All right, Perez. At the end of Night of the Living Dead from 1968, the deputy mistakes what character for one of the undead and pops him.
Oh, man.
It's one of those name ones that we were complaining about.
Yeah, I do not know his name. I'll just say Jeffries.
Ooh, I'm very sorry. It was Ben.
Ben, yeah.
Ben.
All right, so let's go ahead and jump into round 2 with Gore/Disturbing. John, the leader of the Skinheads in Green Room from 2015 is played by what former Star Trek actor?
Jeez, what is this bullshit?
Did you handpick this card for me?
I mean, technically, I handpicked all the cards.
This is very true. So, I get to say this and be correct this time. It is Sir Patrick Stewart.
That is correct. He played Captain Jean-Luc Picard in the Star Trek Next Generation era of the franchise.
And also in the 2020 Picard television show.
Don't sound so enthused.
I actually don't know anything about it to have an opinion either way.
All right, so what is the name of the character that has no control over her titular trait in Teeth from 2007?
Halata vagina.
Unfortunately, it is Don O'Keefe, because it rhymes with teeth.
Oh my gosh. All right, Perez, what was the name of the novella that Hellraiser from 1987 was based on?
BDSM, the story.
Oh man, so close. It was The Hellbound Heart by Clive Barker.
Which makes sense because isn't that part of the title for number 2?
Yeah, it's, Hellraiser, Hellbound, yeah.
Yeah. All right, so let's go ahead and move into round 3, that psychological Jiggity John, Counselor Jiggity John. In Stoker from 2013, which character is not a victim of Charlie Stoker? Is it Richard Stoker, Evelyn Stoker, Gwendolyn Stoker, or Miss McGarrick? Stoker.
I don't remember what any of the names you just said were, so I'm going to go with option B.
Okay, so it's Richard Stoker, Evelyn Stoker,
Yeah, so
Gwendolyn
Evelyn
Stoker.
Stoker.
Okay. The answer is Evelyn Stoker.
What the?
Dude, what's happening?
I have no idea. All right, what character is the owner of the haunted house in The House on Haunted Hill from 1959?
Dr. Franklin.
Dr. Franklin Franklin.
Dr. Franklin.
He was one of those fog founders.
One of those Fogtown founders. All right, it is Watson Pritchard.
Well,
Close. You had some consonants in there. That shared the same
Your
word.
answer also had letters.
all right, Perez, in The Descent from 2005, who had an affair with the husband of Sarah Carter? Was it Beth O'Brien, Sam Vernay, Juno Kaplan, or Rebecca Vernay?
I'll just say Beth.
It was Juno.
Bitch. That's the one I was like, for sure not that one.
Yeah. Because then she finds her the necklace or whatever, and then she's like, "Ooh, you son of a bitch."
Okay, here we go with the paranormal category. Counselor John, who the fuck directed Crimson Peak in 2015?
Is it Guillermo? Or is he a producer?
Could you be more specific?
Guillermo del Toro.
No, Guillermo from the Chelsea. Is it Chelsea Handler or who is Guillermo, the like sidekick?
Oh, I think
on
it's Jimmy Kimmel.
Jimmy Kimmel, yeah.
He's the vampire with the one bag. That is correct, John.
Wow.
Which means officially
I
you
already
have
won.
one trivia. Yes. But we'll go ahead and finish out these cards.
Yeah, I
just
keep
so we don't look
I
like
keep
shit.
destroying the camera in every one of these videos, and I'm getting sick of buying a new camera every time I do that.
The last one he snapped in half with his teeth.
Yeah, so I'm gonna keep it cool and hope that I at least get a point.
What are the 3 rules to Ouija in Ouija Origin of Evil from 2016?
Don't watch the prequel. Or whatever. Don't watch the original movie.
Don't try it yourself. Nothing happens.
Yeah, don't waste your time.
Well, I'm going to go based off of our personal research into Ouija boards that we did when we did ours and say that the rules are probably don't do it alone.
That's 1.
Always say goodbye. Or
That's
shut it
2.
off.
What's the rule that we broke?
Oh, and never play in a graveyard.
It's
Or
cemetery.
Cemetery,
but
yeah.
I'm not
Okay.
gonna get stingy with those things. Those are the correct answers.
Today he's not.
Yeah. And again, I've mentioned this before, but if anybody is interested in hearing that story, I think that would be something fun maybe to do like story time on video about
Yeah.
the time that we did a Ouija board in a graveyard.
On a
Friday the 13th. Yeah, so there you go. 1 point for me. I feel like a king in here.
Good, because that's the only place that's happening.
All right, Perez. In The Sixth Sense from 1999, what is the profession of the protagonist played by Bruce Willis?
He's a psychologist, yes.
Specifically, what kind?
Child.
Yes, you got it. Child psychologist.
All right, you guys
He's
are
he's a professional ghost.
y'all are on the bowl.
I wanted to say detective. I just feel like Bruce Willis is always a detective.
Yeah, in all those Die Hard movies, he was a detective, right?
Yeah, that's what it was. Let's move on to the killer category, even though none of this matters anymore. Counselor John, in what 2013 film does one of the killers wear a lamb mask?
A lamb mask. Is that going to be your next?
God damn it, dude. Really?
I'm international away from sweeping the card.
Yeah, but no one gets international.
I've gotten international on several occasions.
We'll see. You swept an 80s card.
This is true. I did sweep an 80s card.
Cut to me with like one of those like dart blowers. Like,
Oh, he's too incapacitated to answer the last question.
aw, John's too sleepy for trivia.
The rest, yeah, we'll do on the audio. We'll just be like, yeah, John had an unexpected bout of diarrhea, so it'll just be Tone and Anthony today.
You just cut to me in the corner, like shit literally on me. All right. In what 1997 film does one of the criminals rewind the film itself to prevent the death of his partner?
Jack Black does it in Be Kind, Rewind.
Classic 70s horror movie.
It's 1997. 97's horror movie.
Oh.
But the answer is Funny Games.
God damn it, that was going to be my guess, but I was like, I haven't seen it, so I have no idea what that movie's about.
In the original one? Mm-hmm. I don't remember that. In the new one.
Well, now I'm even more excited about checking out that movie. That's cool.
It's incredible.
All right, Perez. The Phantom of the Opera from 1925 was originally released in what audio format? A silent or sound horror film?
silent. That doesn't work for the audio.
No, it's gonna work because I already can fucking see it. He's gonna put in a splash page on the video of yes.
Yeah. But yeah, you're right. It was silent.
Okay, great. Okay, John, let's see if you can sweep for the second time ever, but your first time with the horror cards. Here we go with International. In the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari from 1920.
Dr. Caligari.
Hey, let's fucking power through, nerds. When does an awakened Circe claim Alan will die? When's Alan dying?
3 days.
That is incorrect.
Yeah, I was aware of that.
It is before dawn.
He's not a perfect specimen. Look at that.
But I mean, to get everything but International, I'm pretty fucking happy. All right.
Well, nobody likes a braggart, John.
No.
Okay.
Coming from Internet Darling.
Take it from an internet darling.
Or Camp Stud.
Oh.
Yeah.
The most streaked.
Yeah. Definitely the most humble host.
All right. Who directed Let the Right One In from 2008?
That's going to be Sir Chloe Grace Moretz. Senior.
It is Tomas Alfredson.
Perez in Rengu from 1998. The ex-husband of protagonist Reiko is portrayed by what the Wolverine 2013 actor? This is a very interesting question.
Ang Lee.
Ooh, sorry. It's Hiroyuki Sanada.
All right, so at the end of that, John, you take the crown for the first time in a while. Yeah. But with a solid win.
Yeah, that was impressive.
I don't remember the last time I had a card that successful.
All right, so then we are going to jump into our main discussion.
Hello, weirdos. Hello, creeps. Here I am at Camp Porcelain Peak. Camp is really scary and strange, and they say all the counselors are deranged. I went swimming with a kid named Jason, while some counselors were sucking faces. You remember that girl with Ricky? Turns out she's a dude and showed us her dickie. We tell stories around the fire about killers who won't retire. Most of them all like to wear masks, and they'll slash us if we drink or smoke on some grass. Don't be scared or flip your lids. Killers don't always hurt us kids. Plus we rarely go out alone. We're more scary than each on its own.
As mentioned earlier, we are going to be talking about random Are You Afraid of the Dark episodes. So we just picked 3, and we're watching through the original series. So I know that there is a remake series, and Anthony might talk a little bit about that. But for the most part, we're just going to focus on the original run of this show. This was something that I think we all grew up with, right? Mm-hmm. And for us, it was very similar to Goosebumps, but maybe a little bit scarier. And even going back and watching it now, some of the stuff, I was like, who was this for? This is terrifying. I can't imagine being 10 or whatever and being like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Especially with some of these
I can't
episodes.
even imagine being 10.
Yeah.
Jeez. I think a blind spot for me, which is part of why I was really excited for this episode, because I'm not completely unfamiliar with Are You Afraid of the Dark, but I know Goosebumps like the back of my hand.
Right.
But for whatever reason, and this show started in 92, so the year that I was born. So that would make sense why I would have missed the first run of this, but it came back in like 96, 97 and ran again.
Yeah.
And then came back and ran until 2000. So I must have caught some episodes at some point, but I remember the intro being very scary to me as a kid.
Yeah.
So I think I kind of maybe strayed away from this, not entirely on purpose. Yeah, so I was very excited to check out a few episodes and talk about them, because it wasn't something that I can honestly say influenced my love of horror, but it sounds like it did for a lot of other people.
Including the two of us. Yeah, this was right in my wheelhouse at that age.
Yeah, and I think the answer to the question that the show title asks is yes.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially at the time.
You know how many nightlights I got in my house? Jeez.
There are parts of all of these 3 episodes that we watched that remind me of other movies, and so we'll just go ahead and dive right in. So I watched the episode called "The Tale of the Super Specks." So this was one that I heard was kind of a messed up one. So essentially, what it is, it's this couple, a guy and his girlfriend, and they go to a magic shop, and the boyfriend does some voodoo with some powder and enchants these glasses, like those X-ray vision little shitty glasses. And when the girlfriend puts them on, she sees these black figures in the distance, and it's all practical.
So it's They Live.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So it's very similar to that, right?
Yeah.
But these presents seem to notice her, and they know that she's there. Whereas with They Live, it's just every people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So this had some very good ties to something like It Follows, right? Where only certain people can see it, and it's just coming at you. And this is how this was. It noticed her, these black figures. She would see different, sometimes one, sometimes two, sometimes crowds of them, all in the distance. And as soon as she would put the glasses on, they would see her and then gravitate toward her. And nobody believed her, and her boyfriend was kind of a prankster. So the episode continues to go, and she goes back to the magic shop and is like, "Hey, man, what's up with these glasses?" And the guy's like, "Well, let's do a seance." All the adults in these shows are fucking stupid.
Nuts,
right?
yeah.
And like with the one that you watched too, I was like, who?
Yeah, that's something I was definitely going to bring up. Is
Yeah.
like they're very classic, like children's horror parents, yeah, or just children's parents in TV shows in general.
Pretty
Like
much.
if they're not wah, 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 they're not believing you when you're seeing scary shit.
So then they try to do the seance, and it turns out that what she's seeing is another dimension, and these are beings from another parallel universe. And now, because of this spell that was put on, they are trying to merge, and so they have to merge the universes. And then the people that we're following, our protagonists, end up getting stuck in a crystal ball, and the episode ends with the other universe taking over our universe.
That sounds
nuts.
really cool.
So it's super bleak.
Uh-huh.
Typically, I feel like with Goosebumps and like with Are You Afraid of the Dark, these end on happy notes.
Yeah,
for
and
the
that's
most
like
part.
that was the thing I was reading when I was reading about the production of this show, is that they, for the most part, went out of their way to make sure that all of their scary stories had happy endings, but there are a few exceptions that you can find lists of if you really want to see those ones that end in a more Twilight Zone-esque
Right.
manner of not being entirely.
More of the shock than the happy bow.
Yeah, which I'm definitely a fan of.
Yeah, so like I said, there was parts of it that reminded me of It Follows. What I liked too is, yeah, the whole Midnight Society is just kind of how these stories are bridged together. But in this one, they show the kids outside of the woods. So the main kid, the kid with the glasses, I forget his name, but his dad owns a magic shop, and it has the glasses there. And so one of the other kids is like, "Hey, what are these?" And he's like, "Oh, these are Super Specs. They're X-ray goggles." And then he uses that same thing in his story. So I thought that was really cool, because a lot of times, if you're a writer, then you write what you know, or
Yeah.
you pull on from personal experience, kind of like with any art form, right? So it was cool to see how his life became part of the story.
It kind of makes me want to go back and watch this series in its entirety. I mean, I probably won't just because I have enough stuff on my plate, but I like the idea, and from what I've read, that the Midnight Society is a group of characters. Like, there is some character arc to what's going on. It's not just a framing device. And yeah, the stuff that I was reading was saying that a lot of their stories, they each have different storytelling styles. So depending on who's telling the story in the episode, you'll be like, oh, I can expect certain things from this.
Are you going to get fantasy, or are you going to get...
Something more psychologically.
Yeah, or they draw in
terrifying.
real life events or things they see in their real life. And I think that's a very cool, if you're like really into the show and you get several seasons in and you're picking up on the little things, that's always really rewarding as a viewer. I think it's a really interesting way to do this. And they mixed up the cast throughout. So I don't know any of the kids' names, but I like the idea, because just like you said, when we're telling scary stories, I'm sure we like to, the more you pull in that's real, the scarier it is for everybody around you.
Right, yeah. So, I mean, I thought it was pretty cool. They do the camera thing where when they put the glasses on, it's rainbowy and it's kind of weird. And the figures, like I said, are practical. So it's just people in all black clothing, even like with hoods over their faces. At one point, they're playing basketball and the basketball's black. So it looks neat, and it's pretty scary. And at one point, they're in her house and just like following her and walking closer and closer toward her. It's very scary. I can imagine being a kid and watching that and turning it off.
Yeah,
definitely an episode I would have turned off.
So that's the tale of the Super Specs?
Yeah. So that was cool, and it had a pretty cool soundtrack. When they put the glasses on, there was like some weird synth music, and overall, I mean, pretty scary, pretty good. Even now, I was like, I feel it, I get it. But yeah, other than that, that's pretty much it for that one. Which one did you watch, John?
Yeah, so I watched, I want to say mine was the earliest in the series of the 3 that we chose. And I watched The Tale of Laughing in the Dark, which is...
This is one of the first episodes of the show,
Yeah, this
isn't
is... it goes between different places that you look at it. It's normally referred to as episode 3, but some people refer to it as episode 2 because they don't count the pilot.
Yeah, that's the trouble I ran into finding these episodes, is that if I found them on Prime or if I found them on Nick or if I found them online, they were listed as completely different structures for the seasons and the episodes. There were episodes that I completely could not find looking in on like Prime and stuff.
Yeah, and even like the Nick Hits app on the Apple TV, when you get to certain ones, like the Tale of the Super Specks, you have to pay for that one additionally.
But yeah, so this one is also notable because it has a recurring actor/character who is in a lot of the series. The actor's name is Aaron Taggart, I believe. And in a lot of the episodes, he plays a character called Dr. Vink. But in this one, he plays a carny because basically the concept of this one is that it's a group of kids who are at this like carnival thing, and there's this like walk through haunted house kind of deal. They find out that it's based around a legend of this clown who was working in a similar like fun house, but stole a bunch of money from the carnival, and then he was very well known for smoking cigars. They accidentally burnt down the fun house while he was in it. And so they built the new funhouse on top of the location of the old funhouse. So,
oh man,
so
you moved the graves, but you didn't move the bodies.
Yeah, so Zebo,
pretty much.
Yeah.
Zebo the clown is said to haunt this thing, and so there's this one friend who's basically saying, "Oh, I'm big and tough and badass, and I'm not afraid of anything." And his other two friends are like, "Oh, don't go in there, like they're gonna get you or whatever." And of course, the Aaron Taggart character, the carny, he's out in front being the creepiest fucking human who's ever lived. Fucking yellow teeth, the full-blown carnival barker outfit, just like basically saying, like if you open the right door, you get out alive, but if you don't open the right door, he's coming to get you, kind of a shit. They do a little more research, and they bring all the research together, and he's like, I'm not afraid. And he's like, well, if you're not afraid, go through it. And he's like, in order to prove to you that I'm going to go through there, I'm going to find the clown, and I'm going to steal his nose, and you have to wear it to school for the next week. As soon as there's no one around him, he's fucking petrified. But he finally gets through all of it, and he opens the right door, and then he's like, well, they're not going to think that I went through it, and I'm never going to live it down if I don't find the clown and steal the nose. So he goes back. Of course, the clown is there. He steals the nose and then takes off. So they get back to their houses and they're arguing about whether or not he's going to wear the nose and all that stuff. And he goes. The kid who went in goes back to his house, and his parents aren't there. They left him a note about how they were going to a matinee, and that they left him spaghetti in the freezer.
And then this motherfucker sticks his whole goddamn hand in that thing of pudding.
Yeah, just fucking.
Like, hey, dude, what are you doing?
And is it just me, or are the kids in this show so fucking weird?
They're very Canadian.
Yeah.
And at one point he's like, ooh, smells like cigars. I was like, dude, you're 12 years old. How do you know the distinct smell of cigars?
I mean, we'll get to that point in a little bit. He gets a phone call from his friend saying like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get in an argument with you. And he's like, okay, like you can only wear it at school for one day. And he's like, I was thinking more like 0. And he's like, no, you're wearing it for at least 1. And then he gets another call immediately that's like, give it back. And then he goes back down the stairs to go get his spaghetti out of the microwave. And it's like this weird, like, pinkish purple smoke, but somehow that means that when you open it up, there's a bunch of cigars inside of it instead of it being what's supposed to be in there. He calls his friend back and is like, hey, are you fucking with me? And then somebody picks up the other line. He's like, hey, is that your sister who picked up on the other line? He's like, we only have one phone. That must be at your house. It's the clown. He runs up into his room, realizes that he did not lock the door, jumps up, locks the door really quick. The clown tries to get in, and when he can't get in, he slips a balloon under the door, blows it up. It comes up, and it says, give it back on the balloon, and then it pops. He decides that he's going to go and give back the nose. So he gets there. He's carrying a big brown paper bag. He gets inside, he decides that he doesn't want to give him back the nose at the last second, and then decides again that he's going to. So he opens up the door with the clown, and he sets the nose down, and then also somehow in that brown paper bag, he has an entire fucking humidor of brand new cigars.
Oh, yeah. I went and bought you some cigars.
Yeah, where the fuck did a fucking 11-year-old kid get an entire box of cigars? I know it's the 90s, but fuck.
It's also a story being told by a child around the fire. But no, I get what you're saying. Like,
yeah,
that's the thing that where like I would stop myself sometimes when I was starting to like try to do exactly what you're doing on my episode, and I had to be like, well, I have to remember that the framing device is literally what if some little kids got around a fire and told a scary story. Like, it's not going to make a ton of sense. It's just supposed to be weird and scary. But
so, and then from what I surmised from the end of the episode, because he sprints out as soon as he drops everything off and the door allows him to get out, and he runs by the carnival barker and somehow is smoking one of those brand new cigars. And they hadn't been shown smoking at any point in time up to that point, but he's smoking a cigar out in front of the attraction. So it's tough to say if it was like a supernatural thing or if this guy's really just a fucking creep. It's one way or the other, but either way, all the kids survived because it's Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Happy ending, yeah. So again, we got some it ties.
Yeah.
Also, smoking, like one of those things that was allowed when we were kids, and now is like, if that fucking even remotely happened, like adults barely smoke now in movies and shows.
Yeah.
So that was super weird to see and be like,
have it be such a focus. Like, yeah.
But unfortunately, I also got some Clown House vibes.
Really, yeah. That's what I was kind of feeling. Like Pennywise, obviously, but yeah, I was like. Kind of feels like that movie Clown House, yeah.
And even some Scream stuff, right?
Yeah.
Where he's calling, and that, I mean, I guess the phone motif isn't just exclusively linked to Scream. There's other movies that do that too.
Well, and this one would have come out far before Scream.
Right, yeah. So it's cool to see, like, maybe where somebody saw some of this stuff and then used it. Like, maybe someone saw the Super Specks and was like, what if we did that for adults with STDs? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or something like that. So seeing these kind of branches I thought was pretty interesting, especially even with the one that you watched. I feel like there's bits and pieces from that one. So is there anything else you wanted to add about that episode?
I thought it was a fun episode. It wasn't like over the top creepy. Like I said, the creepiest thing was the carnival barker. He was terrifying.
He stays that consistently creepy even as, was it Dr. Vink?
Yeah, Dr. Vink.
So yeah, my episode also kind of had to deal with clown shit in a way. This one I didn't know if you had done this on purpose, but did we randomly draw these episodes? Or?
Yeah.
Well, that's a huge coincidence because the premise of this episode is exactly the kids' version of the Tales from the Crypt episode that you watched, John, which we had a discussion about just series in general that have done this concept, but it's the whole idea of like kid gets the power to draw things that can come to life. And so the basic premise of this episode is that
I've seen this episode.
Yeah, it's an iconic episode for one reason. I feel like what I will say off the bat is that overall I did not like this episode, and I'm very glad that I decided to past this, look into some more of the show, because if this had been like the one Are You Afraid of the Dark episode I had watched, I probably would be very turned off by the show.
Really?
But what I will say is that I can understand why it would be so scary if you were 10 years old, you know? Yeah. Because the thing that this show does really, really well above a lot of other stuff, like a lot of Goosebumps and everything like that, is they have really, really good scary character, like memorable, scary character design and makeup effects that applies to this episode and then another episode that I watched also. But in this one, this episode is called The Tale of the Ghastly Grinner. Mm-hmm. And the Ghastly Grinner, the titular Ghastly Grinner, is pretty terrifying. So basically this kid, he is super into comic books, which I obviously related to. He's a little artist, which I also related to.
It looked like someone Googled, like, beatnik artist. And I was like, that's the costume.
And then shrunk it down mini.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, so he ends up meeting this mysterious, punky type girl who tells him, like, hey, you've got some sort of talent with drawing, and here's a comic book called The Ghastly Grinner that this other comic book artist drew, and there's some magic special property, blah, 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 blah. So the kid takes the comic book to school. His classic, shitty, old, evil teacher comes up to him and is like, comic books will rot your brain, blah, 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 blah. And this reminded me overall, this episode I felt like had a lot of Creepshow vibes. That's what stuck out to me the most, I think. It reminded me a lot of the dad in Creepshow coming up to the kid and being like, that stuff's going to rot your brain or whatever. So he throws the comic book into like the classroom fish tank or whatever, wets it. So this kid, which goes back to what I was saying about these kids being total freaks, gets home with the wet comic book, tries to read it. His amazing mind, I mean, this guy's a genius. He decides he's going to put the comic book in the microwave and set it for 10 minutes to dry it out, and then leaves the room to go talk on the phone with this girl that he sits by in school, who is like the epitome of like Revenge of the Nerds style, like I'm a nerd, like glasses, braces. Yeah, she's very like, and everything she says is like, well, if we reverse the hypotenuse of the neutron flow, and there's always the other character's like, what if we just used an eraser? There's a moment like that. But he tries to dry the comic book, gets distracted. The comic book explodes and somehow brings the Ghastly Grinner to life, which ends up being the most interesting part of the episode in that the Ghastly Grinner is just this pretty terrifying, Joker-esque, living comic book evil thing that just starts going around town, fucking shit up.
Yeah, so he laughs people insane.
That's the Joker thing. So basically his thing is that he can basically just make you laugh until you start spitting, like, L.A. Looks hair gel out of your mouth. So that happens, and he does it to the school bus driver, which is one of those scenes that I've seen like in recaps of this show, which is the school bus driver turning into this like ghoulish laughing thing and steering the bus off the road, and that stuff is pretty creepy. But then basically we get to a point where the kid decides, I'm going to be the brave little toaster, and I'm going to stop this clown thing. So they're trying to make a plan, and they decide, well, we brought it to life with microwaves. Let's try to stop it with microwaves. The girl and the main character boy lure the Grinner into a room in the school, I guess.
Right.
And they have this whole little science fair type setup to blast him with microwaves. The evil teacher comes in. He's all rah, rah, rah. Ghastly Grinner gets him, starts making him laugh. And they try to blast him with the microwaves, and it doesn't work. And they're like, oh, darn, our plan didn't work. So then what they end up doing, this is the part where it all kind of fell apart for me. I could get what they were going for, but I was like, really?
Right.
Like, it's ultimate low-budget cop-out, I think, where the kid draws himself as a superhero and then says, like, hey, Grinner, look at this. And takes the Grinner and himself into this comic book or whatever. And
it's like other dimension or something.
Yeah, and they duke it out on the pages of the comic book, which sounds like it would be really cool, but literally all it is somebody took construction paper and made big comic book pages, and then the girl's just sitting there reading the climax of the story on camera and going, ooh, wow, ooh, while all of the exciting stuff that they couldn't afford to do on camera is being drawn. And that's what reminded me of Creepshow, but obviously Creepshow works that organically into actual creepy stuff. So I was pretty disappointed by that. He's able to defeat the Grinner, and then there's a very happy, heartwarming ending where he becomes he meets the guy who created the Grinner. The guy's like, you find out that the punky girl was the guy's daughter, and he's like, you got the shine or whatever, you're a super good artiste, and so
you got the juice, kid.
So the kid makes
you got moxie.
Yeah, the kid makes an awful looking comic book named after himself and becomes super famous, classic 90s, like dream kid who is mega rich, and his parents.
Roulette kid.
Yeah, wearing sunglasses. The nerdy girl looks like she's from The Matrix now.
Yeah, but still has the pigtails.
Yeah, so that was that episode. I mean, there were some good things about it, but I know that a lot of people really like this episode, but I think it is
great.
Yeah, and that's the thing is I think that the performance and the makeup and everything of the Grinner is what makes this episode stand out, but as an episode, there's nothing else. Right. Oh, and they do these goofy little transitions between the scenes with comic panels of the Grinner, but then it has like a little banjo type thing that's like or something, like so it completely takes any spook or tension out of the episode. Fair. But I can see why people like this episode for the Grinner, so I will give it props for that.
One thing that you mentioned that I wanted to talk a little bit about is we talked, I think it was a few weeks ago, about how Goosebumps R.L. Stine didn't really want to ever show kids in peril or in danger. And it feels like Are You Afraid of the Dark is like, nah, fuck it.
Yeah.
Let's show them. And then and even the one that you talked about, we get this bus crash. Like, these kids crash in this bus. And it's like, whoa, they could have easily died. You know what I mean? And
it toes the line in a lot of places.
You got smoking and home invasion. And I got, kids getting trapped in another dimension of pitch blackness, like is
Well, and the
pretty
death,
messed
like
up.
the death scenes, like the people, I guess, who are implied to have been killed or driven insane by the grinner in this. That stuff is scary. I mean, that's a really scary thought, and they pull it off in a way that where you can tell, like you were saying, they're homaging other horror movies. They're not just doing whatever goofy thing they think might creep kids out a little bit. They're like, this is horror that we think is good and kids can handle.
Yeah, I mean, and that girl gets like choked out. He's like, and
Yeah.
then lifts her up by the neck. I was like, whoa.
It gets intense, yeah, definitely.
like
I just think that there are scarier episodes of the
Porcelain
show. Yeah.
It did remind me some of, I think is it Nightmare on Elm Street 3 or 4, where the kid's the artist, and then we go into like the
and we go into
dream.
the, yeah. Mhm.
Similar to that. I was like, okay, so maybe that was an influence.
Yeah, I don't
or-
remember if that's Dream Warriors or Dream Master or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I checked that episode out, but because I was a little bit iffy on it, I decided to look up what the actual like consensus for scariest episode of the show was, and I ended up checking that out too. I won't do a whole plot synopsis for that, but a lot of people probably already know this episode. It's the tale of the dead man's float, and this one actually has a very young Jay Baruchel being drowned in the beginning, and so this episode starts off very intense. There is a kid who is drowned, and the standout of this is, just like in the Grinner episode, is the practical effects. The makeup of the actual skeleton monster that comes out of the pool in this episode is terrifying. And this one is just better written. So if I was actually going to recommend an episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark, I would, that if somebody who had never seen it, check both of these out, but I would recommend probably the Dead Man's Float one if you're looking to actually be creeped out. Because this show does actually,
Pack some scares, yeah.
Yeah, it packs some scares.
I was super into it.
Yeah,
And
they're
it's-
quick. They're,
Yeah. And it's horror, but it's light, so I could watch it for bed or whatever,
Yeah.
without getting too scared. But, and, kind of reminisce, and that nostalgia thing's hot, which would make sense why they did the remake series.
Yeah, so a couple things that I wanted to touch on was that at first I was, obviously, my first comparison for the show to anything else would be like Twilight Zone.
Right.
Which is very apparent, and I read that this is intentional when they say, submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society. That's an homage to Rod Serling saying, he regularly would say, like, considered for your approval when introducing Twilight Zone episodes. So
Right.
the creator did that on purpose. I think it's cool, but the show that it actually reminded me of that's current is Channel Zero. The Channel Zero series, I feel like, is very similar in concept in that they take these urban legends and they tend to have younger people involved in some way. And the new series especially gave me those vibes. And so I decided to check out. It's a 3-part reboot.
It's like the Top Hat or something.
Yeah, it's a Mr. Top Hat or something like that. Yeah.
It doesn't have like the Tales of motif.
So yeah, So I definitely would say that this is maybe something that we could revisit on a future episode as dedicated to just this, because watching that first episode, I thought it was pretty fantastic. It had very good reviews, which again, like John was saying, it wasn't really on your radar. It wasn't on mine either until we were doing this, and I looked it up. It has like a 90 on Rotten, and
That's tight.
so I checked it out, and it's shot gorgeously. It's very well written, surprisingly. You can tell it's made for horror fans because there's an entire bit where in order to get into the Midnight Society, somebody asks a girl, have you seen The Changeling? And she says yes. And then all the characters like go
So
back and they
have we.
discuss with themselves and they're like, oh, she's seen The Changeling? Well, she might have a little potential. So it's very much, seems like it's built for us and is a bit more adult. And they make it an overarching story across the 3 episodes where basically the girl is at school, and you get to learn about all of the characters in the Midnight Society, and it focuses a lot more on them. And she comes and tells a story about a carnival, and that ends up kind of coming to life, which is what reminds me of the Channel Zero stuff, is that story ends up kind of, or Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, the movie and everything. It kind of comes to life, and then the kids, I'm assuming in the next 2 episodes, which I haven't seen, have to deal with a real-life scary story as the Midnight Society. Has the kid who played Ben from It.
Oh, nice.
And he's great. Super charming. In a very similar position where he's crushing on a girl and she doesn't want the big kid. She wants the hot guy. But
he's gonna be.
I'm rooting for you, Ben.
He's gonna be like a Jerry O'Connell. He's gonna be like in like 10 years. He's gonna be fucking jacked.
Yeah. So I mean, I definitely would recommend the reboot. I think having decided to check it out, I think it's something that you guys would really like. I was super engaged by it. I thought it was genuinely very creepy and really well shot. So hoping the next 2 don't disappoint, and maybe we can talk about it in the future.
Tight.
So overall, pretty good experience with this roulette. I enjoyed it a lot, and I know that we say this a lot, but these episodes very much had these Twilight Zone feels or even Tales from the Crypt. But again, for children, and it revolves around this camp aspect. So that's why we wanted to dive into this, because it relates to our Camp Peak motif that we're doing for these couple months.
Well,
I would revisit for sure.
Yeah, and I think it would be cool. I mean, there are plenty more episodes to talk about, but I mean, specifically, I think talking about the new one would be something that people might be interested. Let us know if you want to hear us talk about that, or if you've checked it out and you really liked it. I know people on the Instagram have been giving us recommendations for stuff, which is super exciting. But yeah, it made me want to start a Midnight Society, which is kind of what we did. I mean, that's what this is, basically. Much. And especially when we do some ideas we have in the future for telling some spooky stories ourselves.
Right. So then another reason that we wanted to tackle something like this is because, as we've mentioned a lot lately, we want to do an episode talking more about horror for children or children's horror. So this was kind of a primer for that. So we will be doing that within the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. I think that's something that I want to do some more research and really delve into some of the more like psychological aspects of that. Because it's something that definitely interests me a lot. I'm always interested in hearing what other people say got them into the genre. Like if you're a diehard fan, there's always a story. So I think it'll be exciting to explore some of those roots.
All right, so that's going to wrap it up for our main discussion. We'll go ahead and jump into our camp watch list.
Look what I did. I packed you and your cousin some goodies for the ride up to camp. Wasn't that nice of me?
Any chips?
Why, of course. I believe there's a whole bag.
So for me this week, I have a book recommendation that is semi-sci-fi, but I feel like it falls into the category enough. I'm currently reading Never Let Me Go.
Nice.
I don't know if you guys have
Love the movie.
Seen
It's one
that
of my favorite.
or watched that movie. Yeah, so
Alex Garland wrote that, I believe.
That movie?
The movie, yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's awesome. So
it's very possible.
I say sci-fi, but it's sci-fi in the sense of something like 1984 sci-fi, where it's kind of sci-fi.
Yeah,
And
it's like a dystopian,
or like The
a
Road.
dystopian.
Like The
utopia.
Road
Yeah.
could be sci-fi, but it's not really what it's about. So
Yeah.
there's definitely some sci-fi aspects. I mean, it doesn't sound like you're too familiar with it.
Yeah,
the
I love
the
it. I've been
secrets of
wanting
what
to
it
read the
is.
book
Yeah.
for a long time.
So I'm diving into that, and it's very bleak. It's very British, but it's pretty good. I'm about halfway through. I'm trying to finish it by the end of the month, and I'm very into it. So I would recommend that to anybody that's into kind of more literary sci-fi, I guess, where it's not in-your-face science fiction. But that's all I had. So what about you, John?
This one's not really my recommendation at this moment in time, just because I just started reading it this afternoon. A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which is the new Hunger Games book. Yeah, it takes a pretty interesting vantage point. So it's based on the 10th Hunger Games, and it's from the vantage point of Snow before he's president. I'm really interested to see once it starts to pick up, because I haven't even gotten to the point where they're really doing any of the games stuff yet. It's basically just him in a tiny penthouse apartment with his family, and it's all in shambles and shit.
Is it
but
the penthouse?
Yeah.
Piss on the floor there.
But yeah, so I'm interested to dig into that a little bit further. That might end up being my full-blown recommendation for next week. But my actual recommendation is Blood Quantum. I checked it out.
Nice. I've been wanting to hear somebody else talk about this, so I knew whether I should check it out or not.
I watched most of it, too.
So it is worth checking out for sure. It's not a great movie, but knowing some of the actual goings on and what the political agenda of that film is, and knowing how that connects back to Native American society, definitely makes it a little bit of an easier watch. It has some really gruesome shit in it, though. There's some... Anthony's looking at me like there's one scene. There is one scene that is rough.
Yeah, especially for us.
Yeah,
McGruff the crime dog. Rough.
Yeah, so there's definitely some social commentary to this film, and it does twist the genre in a way that I hadn't seen previously.
And this is a zombie film?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So similar to how Girl with All the Gifts kind of twisted a little bit, this has that same idea.
The chick with all them presents.
hella presents.
Hella presents, yeah.
But yeah, like I said, I enjoyed the shooting style. I thought that it was very gory in good ways. It was a little slower burn, but like I said, because it has that socio-political commentary, it's an enjoyable watch. And there's enough to get you from moment to moment. There's some really sad things that happen in there too. it's not the least complicated watch that's out there. It's not something where you can turn off your brain and just expect to enjoy it, because the story can get a little muddled. If you can get past that and you're willing to do a little bit of research on the side, it's definitely worth watching.
Yeah, I think that's why I hadn't checked it out yet, was because I knew that the premise was around something that was very real world with a culture sort of thing. Like, that sounded like it might be kind of depressing. Well, I may or may not check it out in the next couple of days.
What about you, Anthony? You had some recs for us?
I have two, yeah. So the first one is going to be a movie that was absolutely not on my radar. I had no idea it existed. It is called A Dark Song.
Okay.
This came out, I believe, either late last year or beginning of this year, and it is an Irish horror movie. It had popped up on a list of like underrated or missed horror movies, and I decided to check it out. And the basic premise is that there is this woman who has lost her son to... he's been murdered. She doesn't know who murdered him, but he was kidnapped and murdered. So she has tried everything to try to figure out who the murderers were, figure out what happened. Her last resort now is to hire this drunk black magic practitioner type guy. He's like middle aged, and asks him to help her do a black magic ritual so she can talk to her son, which sounds very by the books at the beginning, but the whole movie basically is dedicated to that ritual. They do it in what I would imagine is a very realistic fashion, in that it takes like 6 months of them being isolated in this house together, performing daily and nightly occult rituals. So you get to see all of these different different things they have to do to try to get the spirits to come. And the movie...
Did we watch that?
I think we watched this.
Yeah.
Did you like it? Would you?
Yeah, no,
watch it again?
I thought it was really good. All I was going to say is that it's probably not for everyone, because it's one of those things where the easiest route I would take is, if you really enjoyed The Babadook, you'll like this movie, is what I will say, because I feel like the way this movie wraps up at the end is very similar, in that it could really piss people off, or it could be totally fine with people who get what they're trying to do.
Right.
So I would say, if you're really into occult shit, and if you're really into I always say it a slow burn. I didn't feel bored at any point during this movie, and it is a slow burn. I just think that visually it's very interesting to watch, and it's really interesting if you're into any of that kind of black magic stuff. And then when it starts to get supernatural at the end, I do think there are some pretty quality scares and moments, especially like the door talking stuff with her son is very creepy. The other thing that I wanted to recommend is, I'm almost absolutely sure we've talked about this in the past, but Castle Rock. I finished season 2. Finally got around to watching it, and I enjoyed it. I thought it was pretty good. The first season, I was into it. I thought it was a really cool concept, but I thought at the end they kind of botched what they were trying to do, which was make it something that Stephen King fans would like actually get us really like into the mixing of because they wanted to tell their own story, and they just kind of thought maybe the Stephen King stuff would help out. This season felt very much more like we're trying to tell a legit prequel to Misery, and I thought that overall, while it lost me a little bit in the middle, the season wraps up in a way that I felt like, cool, I can pick up Misery and watch this and feel like I watched a legitimate prequel to how she got to where she is. I thought Lizzie Kaplan, because I had been watching a show with my girlfriend called Party Down, which is really funny, and I was like, oh, Lizzie Kaplan's in this show, do you want to check it out? It's called Castle Rock, I've been meaning to watch the season. And she was like, yeah, sure. She ended up hating Lizzie Kaplan in the show. I thought she was...
The mom character? The Annie Wilkes character?
Annie Wilkes, yeah.
Oh,
I thought she was fantastic, but if you don't like Kathy Bates' Annie Wilkes, Lizzie Kaplan is doing an impression. So, that's the thing, is I don't think that my girlfriend maybe would like... Misery, yeah. But I love that movie. I think it's almost perfect, and I thought that this season had a lot of really good stuff. Tim Robbins from Shawshank Redemption. I mean, obviously people are very excited about that. It's a very similar move to bringing Sissy Spacek to the first season from Carrie. So I thought that was really cool. He really knocks it out of the park. And there's a lot of Salem's Lot stuff that ties in that actually ends up taking up the majority of the season. That lost me a little bit, but there's some cool, creepy, supernatural stuff. Elsie Fisher from 8th grade is in it. So, yeah.
Did you feel like they wrapped up this season better than they wrapped up the first one? Because the first one, they could have easily continued that story and done a second season with that. You know what I mean?
I don't know how much behind-the-scenes stuff happened in terms of the reception to season 1. I know it had pretty good reviews, but a lot of people didn't like that it was very dour, and a lot of people didn't like that it was kind of confusing and didn't really have a very solid ending. This season, the way it was marketed, which almost made me a little bit iffy because my girlfriend had not seen the first season, and I hadn't seen it in quite a while. This season does, toward the later part of the season, start bringing in elements from the first season and trying to tie it into a larger Castle Rock narrative, which is cool if you watch the first season, but completely unnecessary if you're going into this as it was advertised, which is an unrelated anthology installment in Castle Rock, which for the most part it plays that way, and I think it works better that way. Apparently at this point there are no intentions to do a season 3.
Oh, wow.
There hasn't been enough traction. Stephen King says everything that comes out around his work is perfect now, but has not spoken a word besides the sets look all right, like pretty good, on Twitter for Castle Rock, which I think is a shame, because if you like Stephen King, you definitely should check it out. And as a fan myself who has a passing knowledge of all of his work, that's basically all you need to enjoy this show, and you can pick out all the little things. Like I don't know if you knew this, but when you were watching it, but the main son character, the guy who gets possessed or whatever, his character is supposed to be the Kiefer Sutherland's character from Stand By Me.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, the Ace Merrill character, he's supposed to, and so they reference that with the train tracks and things like that. So if you have an eagle eye or you have google.com, you can find all of those fun Easter eggs, and it's a really enjoyable watch. Shout out to Lizzie Kaplan. I'd like to see her in some more stuff. She's in Cloverfield, right?
Yeah.
The original? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Her head went...
And we didn't even get to see it.
Cool. That's all I got.
Awesome. So that was an annotated watch list. If you are interested in seeing more of our watch list, then go ahead and head over to our Instagram, where we put the full week's watch list up on there. That is going to wrap it up for this week's episode. We hope that you guys enjoyed. Next week, we are going to be continuing with our Porcelain Peak camp theme, and we are going to dive into...
Porcelain Peak, trademark, copyright.
Yeah, what I said. And we're going to dive into American Horror Story 84 or 1984 or Summer Camp or whatever the fuck it's called.
Yeah.
Again, don't forget to hit up our socials, and don't forget to check us out on YouTube so you can see our handsome faces.
Question mark.
Yeah, and check out the new Porcelain Peak Facebook group. Not many people know this. I wasn't aware, but pages are apparently not the cool, hip thing to have if you want people to interact with your podcast and create a cool community, which is really what I want. Is I just want to talk to you guys about horror and sci-fi movies. It's all I want at the end of the day is someone to listen to me talk. So if you want to hop on to Facebook and check out Porcelain Peak, there's a page and a group. Feel free to like both of those, but on the group, you are free to post whatever the hell you want as long as it is respectful and has to do with the topics that we cover on this show.
Yes, and in addition, you've heard it last week's episode and on this week's episode, our little camp theme song. So if you guys want to send us your audio of that or a video of you doing that, then we will try our best to incorporate that into either our socials or into the episode itself in the future. So
yeah, and just be aware that we are not trying to become successful for our singing talent. No. So don't feel like there's any bar that's been set that you need to meet, okay? If you want to just hum the song, that is 100% fine with us.
Yeah, just
do it on a kazoo or something.
Some Porcelain Peak love.
Yeah. Yeah, and then last thing that I wanted to talk about is that we did have a successful giveaway for a Porcelain Peak mask back when we were having people try to guess what movie we were talking about when we did Upstream Color. And one of our fans, Brenton Owen, correctly guessed, not only guessed the frames that were from that movie, but guessed the music video that they had been reused in, at some point, which I wasn't even aware of. So that guy has knowledge. And so sent him some stickers, a face mask, and a little note. And he just got those a couple days ago, posted a little picture on his social media, which is really awesome to see. Seen a couple different people now besides us with the Porcelain Peak masks. Anytime people are wearing our merch or anything, that's super exciting. But yeah, congrats to him.
Actually, the intern had one on the other day.
Yeah. But yeah, Brenton, he has been really good about recommending new stuff for us to check out and interacting with our posts. So definitely want to give him a shout out. We will be doing more of those giveaways in the future, I hope, because it was really fun. And I like challenging you guys and giving you free stuff. So
that is going to wrap it up this week. I have been Tone.
I've been John.
And I've been, as always, camp stud internet darling Anthony Silva.
God, it just gets longer.
Thank you guys for listening. We'll see you next week.
Keep it campy. You can find Porcelain Peak on Apple Podcasts, Google Play Store, Spotify, TuneIn, and Stitcher. Wherever you listen, don't forget to rate, review, share, and subscribe.
so you never miss a spine-tingling episode. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and at porcelainpeak.com for additional content. Special thanks to Randy Greer for composing the Porcelain Peak intro music and to Anthony Silva for designing the Porcelain Peak logo. All episodes and additional content is hosted, written, produced, designed, and edited by the Porcelain Peak team, consisting of Anthony Perez, John Brasher, and Anthony Silva.
This has been here words for awareness production.